or Palestinian. He could also apply them to any of his many enthusiasms, to the extent that he would soon know more than a lifetime aficionados. Applied to cricket, this enabled the writing of two of the finest books in the game's considerable literary canon. They were works of literary style, warmth, and humour, and there's something fitting about the fact that they sit along my shelves between Gabriel Garcia Marquez and Spike Milligan. And there was an appreciation of individuals and personality. He loved great cricketing artists like Viv Richards and Inzamam ul Haq, but also lesser performers. He hugely enjoyed the brief late career flourish of a West Indian opener named Clayton Lambert, saying, "He's bald, he's middle-aged, and he's overweight, and he hits blazes out of the ball. What's not to like?" He also got other sports. In more than a century of trying the Rugby Football League, has never come up with a better slogan than Mike's reaction to what may have been the only game of league he ever attended. "What a great game! The best of American football and none of the bullshit." But it was cricket and baseball that he loved. We all have our mental images of Mike. Mine find me sat across the downstairs living room table at his and Liz's home in Stoke Newington. There's cricket on the telly, probably involving India, Pakistan, or Sri Lanka, and an open bottle of red wine. Mike is rolling a joint, and I'm enjoying some of the best, the most stimulating, the most simply fun conversation I've ever had, or am likely to have. He's a huge loss, the more so because it was so cruelly early. We'll all miss him dreadfully. But most of all, we were lucky to have him.
Mike wrote many books, and many brilliant books. One that I really enjoyed and learnt a lot from was If I'm Not For Myself, the story of a Jewish childhood in the United States. And it taught me an awful lot about him, his life, and the community and society he came from, and why he was so passionate as a socialist, as somebody who supported the rights of Palestinian people, and somebody who supported socialism and justice all over the world. The next two speakers encompass that. Julia Bard from the Jewish Socialist Group, and Brian Klug from the Jews for Justice for Palestine group. They're also here this afternoon. I'm delighted they are, and delighted the banner is here. Julia, over to you.
Mike encapsulated enlightenment, courage, intelligence, and above all, principles. He was learned, a word which is usually associated with rather musty old people. Tragically, he never will get old, but if he had, he would not have been musty. Like many of us in the Jewish Socialist Group, he arrived at his internationalism, his diasporism, and his commitment to justice for the Palestinians by swimming against the current, as John McDonnell said. He defied the ideological imperatives placed on Jewish people to express our identity through religion or Zionism or both. But he didn't just defy those imperatives. He mobilized his lively intellect and deep knowledge to assert an alternative version of the Jewish condition. He drew on a history that's been obscured by nationalism to describe a past and envisage a future in which to be Jewish meant embracing solidarity, egalitarianism, and internationalism, which meant nurturing minority cultures and resisting attempts to contort all of us into national definitions of identity. His book, If I'm Not For Myself, Journey of an Anti-Zionist Jew, looks from its title as though it's going to be an autobiography. But like all Mike's work, it can't be contained within that or any other category. In it, he wrote, "My Jewishness is far more than the sum of others' perceptions. It's a locale where the self intersects with history, past and present. Every attempt to narrow down Jewishness has backfired, broken down, or produced manifest absurdities. This is his springboard for exploring his own and his family's history, brilliantly contextualized and as a vehicle for an astonishing voyage through Jewish history. He takes in the biblical prophets, the French Enlightenment, the Russian Empire, and contemporary Zionism, and all points between, but not in chronological order, of course. He conveys individual voices and sweeping vistas. It's a vivid, engaging, and polemical book. But although he doesn't hide his anger at the inhumanity of Israel's actions, neither does he belittle the views of his opponents. In the book, he grapples with the conundrum of someone who can be simultaneously a socialist, an anti-racist, and an ardent Zionist. He's driven to understand what motivates real people in real situations and to recognize and even warm to the contradictions that we all incorporate. He then points to a different Jewish tradition of opposition to Zionism. And he asserts that the opposite of Zionism is not just the negative anti-Zionism, but a positive diasporism, the reality of so many people's lives as minorities across the world, and a reality that has characterized Jewish life through good times and bad. We in the Jewish Socialist Group learnt from him, and I think he also found a stimulating and nurturing place amongst us. He was a valued and irreplaceable comrade and friend, and we will go on disseminating his brilliant, much-needed writings to a wider audience, which now includes a growing younger generation of dissident, diasporist, anti-nationalist Jews. I just want to add a personal note. My best friend has cancer, and she's not going to recover. Like Mike, she's a regular visitor to Bart's Hospital. And when I've accompanied her, I've seen what Mike so powerfully described in his last book, The Price of Experience. The skill, the commitment, the real care given in this complex, underfunded, stressed-out institution that is the National Health Service. Like Mike, my friend is a clear-sighted rationalist. She doesn't pray for miracles or talk about battling or beating her illness, but goes on being what she is and doing what she does in the best way she can, just as Mike did right to the very end of his life. Mike's book has been a great source of strength and solace to me, as I'm sure it has for so many other people. It's given me a language to express what I thought was inexpressible and the courage to resist resorting to comforting cliches. It's also given me the political understanding to underpin my anger, all our anger, at this mortal threat to the NHS now. Mike has left us a treasure house of sparkling ideas to enlighten and enrich us, which we'll need in the years to come. I just wish he was here so we could thank him.
Mike, as we have been hearing today, was a man of many parts. And like Julia, as Jeremy says, I shall focus on the Jewish part. What I'm about to read is taken from the obituary that I wrote for Mike in the spring issue of Jewish Socialist. It is nighttime in East Jerusalem. Riva, my partner, and I are sitting at a table in the dimly lit interior of Askadinya, a Palestinian restaurant, waiting for Mike to join us for dinner. Suddenly, a frail figure, slightly bent, leaning on a stick, appears at the entrance. He hobbles over to our table and painfully squeezes himself into a chair. For the next 3 hours, the whole place is lit up as Mike regales us with anecdotes and analysis, illuminating every subject under the sun. Now, people who knew Mike often describe him as a Renaissance man on account of the breadth of his interests. I call him a mensch because of the depth of his humanity and because mensch is a vivid Yiddish word for someone with his qualities. Mike, by his own reckoning, never ceased to be a Yiddle. In the preface to If I Am Not For Myself, he says, and I quote, "I have never had the slightest doubt that I am a Jew." But to be frank, Mike was never cut out to be a rabbi. For he was also, by his own account, an atheist and a left secularist, and so he asks himself in the book, what makes me a Jew? What comes immediately to mind is Isaac Deutscher's category of the non-Jewish Jew, but that's wrong. Deutscher's examples either did not identify as Jews or did not use Jewish sources. They went to the border and crossed it, leaving Judaism behind. Mike did not leave it behind. When he crossed the border into the universal space of humankind, he took his Jewish identity with him. Not only did he take it with him, he took it by the scruff of the neck and he made it his own, claiming it for himself with such tenacity that not even the combined forces of the chief rabbi, the border deputies, and the embassy of the State of Israel could take it away from him. What he took with him was not a religion, but a sense of sharing with other Jews common sources, common texts, and a distinctive historical experience as a minority. For Mike, Judaism was not a set of beliefs about the origin of the world or the order of things, but a set of references, a repository of human experiences, a repertoire of meaning, in Stuart Hall's phrase, on all of which he drew, like Jacob at the well upon seeing Rachel for the first time. Mike was more in the tradition of Jewish secular thought that David Biale describes in Not in the Heavens. He was someone who did not so much cross the Jewish border as opening it up to the width of the world. For Mike, being an anti-Zionist meant being simultaneously opposed to two kinds of oppression. First, it was, in his view, an expression of a positive solidarity with the Palestinians as victims of injustice and specifically of colonialism, in his words. But second, it was an act of defiance against those forces that police the Jewish border and seek, you might say, to colonize the self of individual Jews. Their take is that Jews who reject Zionism reject themselves. For Mike, to the contrary, anti-Zionism meant claiming himself as a Jew. He wrote, I quote, "The people who call us self-haters want to steal ourselves from us, appropriate ourselves for their cause, and speaking as a self, I'm damned if I'm going to let them get away with it." These are the words with which his memoir closes. They refer back to the quotation on which he drew for the title of the book, the whole of which is this. This is from the Talmud. "If I am not for myself, who will be for me? If I am for myself alone, what am I? If not now, when?" These are three questions in one. They were indivisible for Mike in his life as they were for the ancient Palestinian whom he was quoting, Hillel Hazaken, Rabbi Hillel the Elder. Hillel also said, "In a place where there are no men, strive to be a man." Mike did. He was a mensch of many parts, and a friend whose company I miss. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks very much for that. My personal favourite passage in that book is when he talks about, I think he's quoting his nephew, Mike's quoting his nephew, and he says that someone came up to him in a college and said, "The trouble with you is that you're a self-hating Jew." And his nephew said, "No, you misunderstand, it's you I hate, you bastard." Terrible, that's the bit I remember out of all of that. But now, the person I'd like to introduce you now is someone I've met many times when I was round at Mike's house, Aditya Sarkar. Please give him a big round of applause, please.
Now, I'd known Mike for many years before I really came to know him. I first met him in 1994 on one of his many visits to India in that decade. And I came to know him as an occasional visitor to India, as someone whose conversation would light up the world for a few hours. And of course, I also came to know him as a writer of books which were on precisely the themes I was interested in knowing more about, books which fed my consciousness in ways I'm still trying to catch up with. But our friendship really dates back to 2005, when I initially stayed with Mike and Liz for a few days when I came to London to do a PhD. And very rapidly, Liz and Mike and the flat in Stoke Newington became my home away from home, defining my life in all sorts of ways. So there are obviously many, many memories, and I wondered for a long time what I should talk about today. And I thought what I should share with you is my memory of the last full conversation I had with Mike. I mean, grim, of course, but also beautiful. At the beginning of this year, immediately after returning from India, I heard from Liz that Mike had taken a turn for the worse. I rushed to Bath to see him, dreading the meeting, and Liz, of course, had warned me it would be upsetting to see him. There was the shock of seeing him attached to his bed by a bewildering array of wires, but immediately, being Mike, he instantly turned this into a conversation about history. What would modern medicine